London, 1815. Miss Olivia Linden stared at the modest pile of coins on her writing desk, fighting the urge to sweep them into her palm and count them again. Such an undignified gesture would change nothing. The sum remained woefully inadequate to address the mountain of debts her father had accumulated before his untimely demise 3 months prior. £117, 6 shillings, she murmured, adjusting her reading spectacles. Against debts of nearly 3,000. She sank into her chair, removing the spectacles and pinching the bridge of her nose. The truth that had been lurking at the edges of her consciousness for weeks now asserted itself with brutal clarity. There was no mathematical solution to their predicament. No amount of household economizing, no further dismissal of servants, no additional pawning of family heirlooms would prevent their eventual ruin. Marriage, that most expedient of female solutions, was the only answer. She must find a wealthy husband, and quickly. Olivia had always prided herself on her practical nature. While other young ladies spent their precious allowances on ribbons and fans, she had invested in books of philosophy and mathematics. While they practiced coy glances in looking-glasses, she had studied estate management and household accounts. Marriage is merely a business arrangement, she had often told her younger sister, Lydia, whenever the girl sighed over romantic novels. A practical exchange of resources and social position that, if negotiated shrewdly, can benefit both parties. Now, at 26, having refused 2 respectable offers in her youth, Olivia would be forced to test her own pragmatism. The irony was not lost on her. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called, hastily covering the coins with a ledger. Mrs. Perkins, their housekeeper of 20 years, one of only 3 servants they had managed to retain, appeared in the doorway, her face drawn with concern. "Miss Linden, there's a gentleman caller." Olivia frowned. "At this hour?" "We are not receiving visitors." "It's His Grace, the Duke of Jarlton, miss." Olivia's eyebrows shot upward. "The Duke of Jarlton? Are you certain?" "Yes, miss. His carriage bears the crest." This was peculiar indeed. Though her father had occasionally mentioned the Duke, they had apparently served together in the Peninsular War. Olivia had never been introduced to him. What business could such an exalted personage have with their diminished household? "Show him to the drawing-room. I shall be down directly." After Mrs. Perkins withdrew, Olivia hurried to the looking-glass. Her appearance was hardly suitable for receiving a duke. Her dark brown hair was simply arranged, her morning dress of blue muslin serviceable rather than fashionable. But there was no time for anything more elaborate. Descending the stairs, she composed her features into a mask of serene competence. Whatever His Grace wanted, she would meet him as an equal, not a supplicant. The man who awaited her in the drawing-room was not what she expected. Tall and broad-shouldered, the Duke of Jarlton possessed a commanding presence that made their modest drawing-room seem suddenly small. His attire was impeccable but understated, no ostentatious displays of wealth beyond the quality of his tailoring. He stood by the window, his profile severe as he gazed out at the small garden. When he turned at her entrance, Olivia was struck by the intensity of his gaze. His eyes were a stormy grey beneath dark brows, and though his face might have been handsome, it was rendered austere by the hard set of his jaw and a thin scar that traced from his right temple to his cheek. "Miss Linden," he said, bowing formally. "I appreciate you receiving me without notice." "Your Grace," she curtsied, keeping her voice level. "This is an unexpected honor. I regret my father is no longer with us to welcome you properly. Yes, I was grieved to hear of Colonel Linden's passing." His voice was deep and measured. "He was a fine officer and saved my life at Salamanca. A debt I never adequately repaid." "Ah. So that was it." A visit of condolence, delayed by whatever business Dukes attended to. Olivia gestured to a chair. "May I offer you tea, Your Grace?" "Thank you, no." He remained standing, seemingly uncomfortable in the small, somewhat shabby room. "I shall come directly to the point, Miss Linden. I am aware of your family's financial circumstances." Olivia felt her cheeks burn. Please," he raised a hand, "no explanations are necessary. Your father's debts are not of your making. However, I find myself in a position to be of assistance." She straightened her spine. "We do not require charity, Your Grace." Something that might have been amusement flickered briefly in his eyes. "I am not offering charity, Miss Linden. I am offering marriage." The room seemed to tilt momentarily. Surely she had misheard. "I beg your pardon." "I am proposing marriage," he repeated, as if stating something as mundane as the time of day. "I require a duchess, and you require financial security. It seems a reasonable arrangement." Olivia stared at him, speechless for perhaps the first time in her adult life. The Duke of Jarlton, one of the wealthiest peers in England, was proposing marriage to her, a practically dowerless daughter of a colonel, in their faded drawing-room, as casually as if suggesting a game of cards. "Your Grace," she finally managed, "we have never been properly introduced. You know nothing of me. I know you are Colonel Linden's eldest daughter. I know you manage this household since your mother's death. I know you are educated, sensible, and of good family, if not great fortune." His gaze was appraising but not unkind. "Most importantly, I know your father once saved my life at great risk to his own. Ensuring his daughters do not fall into poverty seems a minimal repayment." "And that is your only motivation?" "Gratitude to my father." A shadow crossed his face. "My motivations are my own concern, Miss Linden. What should concern you is whether my proposal serves your interests. I offer you and your sister a position in society, financial security, and my name. In return, I require a hostess for my homes and eventually an heir." The businesslike manner of his proposal should have appealed to her practical nature. Was this not precisely the type of marriage arrangement she had always advocated? Yet something in his detachment made her hesitate. "This is most unexpected, Your Grace. Surely there are many young ladies of the ton who would be more suitable matches for a man of your position. I have no interest in society misses with their vapid conversation and scheming mothers." His tone hardened. "I require a wife who understands that marriage is a practical alliance, not a romantic fantasy." Olivia found herself nodding before she could stop. Had he somehow read her very thoughts on the matter? "I see," she said carefully. "And when would this arrangement need to be decided?" "I leave for my estate in Derbyshire tomorrow. I would prefer an answer now, but I can grant you until this evening." He checked his pocket watch. "I shall call again at 7. "That is hardly sufficient time to consider such a life-altering proposition." "Is it not? The mathematics seem quite straightforward to me. Your situation is precarious. I offer a solution. The only real question is whether you find my person so objectionable that you would prefer poverty." His bluntness should have offended her, but Olivia found it refreshingly direct compared to the veiled language of society. Still, marriage to a virtual stranger, a duke, no less, required more consideration than a few hours. "I have a responsibility to my sister," she said. "I cannot make such a decision without your sister would, of course, come to live with us. She would have the best governesses, a proper coming out when the time arrives, and a generous dowry." Olivia blinked. He had anticipated her primary concern. How very efficient of him. I will consider your proposal, Your Grace, and give you my answer this evening. He nodded briskly, apparently satisfied with this compromise. Until 7, then. He bowed and turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. One thing more, Miss Linden. I should make it clear that while I offer you my name and fortune, I do not offer my heart. That is not part of our bargain. With those cold words, he departed, leaving Olivia standing in the middle of the drawing-room, wondering what manner of man she was considering binding herself to for life. He said what? Lydia's eyes widened to a comical degree as she sat on Olivia's bed later that afternoon. That he offers his name and fortune, but not his heart, Olivia repeated, pacing the small confines of her bedchamber. How dreadfully romantic! Lydia clutched her hands to her chest. Romantic? It's precisely the opposite of romantic. It's a business transaction. But that's what makes it romantic, don't you see? Lydia insisted. He must have been hurt terribly by someone to say such a thing. His heart is clearly wounded, and only the right woman could heal it. Olivia rolled her eyes. At 17, Lydia viewed the world through the lens of the sentimental novels she devoured. This is not one of your Gothic romances, Lydia. The Duke is simply being honest about his expectations. And you find that appealing? Lydia asked, suddenly serious. I find it practical. Olivia stopped pacing and sat beside her sister. And practicality is what we need at present. You realize our situation, don't you? Lydia's smile faded. I know things are difficult since Papa died. Difficult doesn't begin to describe it. We have less than 2 months before the creditors can legally seize the house. Everything, our home, our respectability, our future, it all hangs by a thread. But to marry a man you've just met, a man who declares himself incapable of love. He didn't say he was incapable of love. He merely stated it wasn't part of the arrangement. Olivia straightened her shoulders. And it's not as if I've been harboring romantic notions myself. I've always maintained that marriage is a practical alliance. Yes, but you never meant it, Lydia said with startling insight. I beg your pardon. Oh, Livy, you've always talked about marriage as a business arrangement because you're afraid of ending up like Mama, loving Papa so desperately while he gambled away her dowry and broke her heart with his recklessness. Olivia flinched. That's not, it is. You decided long ago that if you couldn't have a love like Mama's without the pain that came with it, you'd have no love at all. Discomfited by her sister's perception, Olivia rose and walked to the window. Regardless of your romantic theories about my character, the Duke's offer solves our immediate problems. You would have the future you deserve, and I would have the security to manage a great household, which has always been my strength. But what of happiness? Happiness is a luxury, Lydia. Security is a necessity. Her sister was quiet for a long moment. Will you accept him, then? Olivia gazed out at the small garden where their mother had once tended roses. I don't see that I have any choice. Precisely at 7 o'clock, the Duke of Jarlton was announced. He entered the drawing-room looking even more imposing than he had that morning, dressed for evening in a midnight blue coat that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. Miss Linden, he bowed. I trust you have had sufficient time to consider my proposal. Hardly sufficient, Your Grace, but I have considered it thoroughly nonetheless. And your answer? His direct gaze was disconcerting. Olivia drew a steadying breath. Before I give it, I would know more about what this arrangement would entail. Would we reside primarily in London or in the country? If he was surprised by her question rather than an immediate acceptance, he didn't show it. I maintain residences in both. Jarlton House in Mayfair, and Thornfield in Derbyshire. I prefer the latter, but understand a duchess has certain social obligations in town. And my sister? Would divide her time between our residences, as you would. She would have appropriate companionship and education. Olivia nodded. And what duties would you expect of me as your duchess? His expression remained impassive. To manage my households. To act as hostess when required. To behave with the dignity befitting your station. And eventually, to provide an heir. The clinical way he spoke of what would be their most intimate connection sent a shiver down Olivia's spine, though whether of apprehension or something else, she couldn't say. I see. And would this be an exclusive arrangement? For the first time, a flash of genuine emotion, something like anger, crossed his features. I do not keep mistresses, Miss Linden, if that is your concern. I would expect the same fidelity from my duchess. Of course, she said quickly. I meant no offense. None taken. His expression smoothed. Have you further questions, or are you ready to provide your answer? Olivia hesitated. There was one more thing. Your Grace, while I understand this is not a love match, I would hope for civility between us. Perhaps even friendship in time. Something shifted in his gaze, a slight softening around the edges. I am not opposed to friendship, Miss Linden. I simply wish to be clear that romantic attachment is not my objective. Nor mine, she assured him, though the words felt strangely hollow. Then we understand each other. Your answer? Olivia straightened her shoulders. I accept your proposal, Your Grace. He nodded once, as if concluding a business transaction. Good. I shall have my solicitor draw up the settlement papers immediately. We should marry within the month. So soon? Is there any reason to delay? Your circumstances are pressing, and I am expected in Derbyshire for the autumn. No, I suppose there is not. She twisted her hands together. Will you announce the engagement formally? A notice in the papers tomorrow will suffice. I see no need for an elaborate engagement period. He studied her for a moment. Unless you wish for such things. No, she said quickly. I prefer simplicity. As do I. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small box. This is for you. Olivia accepted it with surprise. Inside lay a ring, an emerald surrounded by diamonds, set in gold. It was elegant and clearly valuable, but not ostentatious. It was my grandmother's, he explained. The Duchess of Jarlton has worn it for 3 generations. As she slipped it onto her finger, Olivia was struck by the weight of history it carried, and the weight of the commitment she had just made to this enigmatic man. Thank you, Your Grace. It's beautiful. You may call me Preston, in private. Preston, she repeated, testing the name. And I am Olivia. He nodded, but made no move to take her hand or seal their engagement with any gesture of affection. Instead, he simply checked his pocket watch. I have business to attend to this evening, but shall call tomorrow to discuss the wedding arrangements. Good evening, Olivia. And with that, he was gone, leaving her with an exquisite ring, a transformed future, and the distinct feeling that she had just made a bargain with a man whose secrets ran far deeper than he had revealed. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. True to his word, the Duke, Preston, had his solicitors draw up a settlement so generous it took Olivia's breath away. Not only were all the family debts to be paid, but she and Lydia would each have substantial personal allowances, and her sister would eventually have a dowry large enough to secure a brilliant match. The wedding was arranged for the end of September, a mere 3 weeks after the proposal. Preston had purchased a new wardrobe for Olivia befitting her future station, had their small London home restored to respectability, and dealt with the creditors who had been circling like vultures. Yet for all his efficiency in these practical matters, he remained emotionally distant. Their meetings were brief, focused entirely on wedding arrangements or household matters. He never attempted to court her, never sought private moments for conversation, never expressed any personal interest beyond the occasional approving nod at her management of the preparations. Perhaps his shy, suggested Lydia, who had developed an implausible theory that the Duke was secretly pining for Olivia but too wounded by some past betrayal to show it. A shy Duke? That's a contradiction in terms, Olivia replied as they walked through the park, enjoying a rare moment of leisure. No, he's simply a practical man who sees marriage as I do, as a social contract rather than a romantic entanglement. Then why does he look at you that way when he thinks you aren't watching? What way? Olivia asked, embarrassed by the flutter of interest she felt. Like a man dying of thirst who spotted water but fears it might be a mirage. Lydia! What nonsense! You've been reading too many novels again. But Olivia found herself watching Preston more carefully after that, trying to catch this supposed look. She never did, but she did notice other things, how he always positioned himself between her and the street when they walked, how his jaw tightened when other gentlemen paid her compliments, how he seemed to relax fractionally when she expressed opinions on books or politics that aligned with his own. A week before the wedding, Preston invited Olivia and Lydia to tour Jarlton House, which would soon be their London residence. The mansion on Berkeley Square was magnificent, 5 stories of elegance with a facade of Portland stone and interiors decorated in the height of fashion. As the housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, led them through grand reception rooms and intimate sitting rooms, Olivia tried to imagine herself as mistress of such splendor. It seemed almost laughable that she, who had been pinching pennies and darning stockings, would soon be responsible for a household of over 30 servants and entertaining the highest echelons of society. "And this is the library, Your Grace, Miss Linden," Mrs. Winters announced, opening a set of double doors to reveal a 2-story room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive desk. Olivia gasped with pleasure. "Oh, it's wonderful!" For the first time, she saw Preston smile, a genuine smile that transformed his severe features and lit his grey eyes. "You approve?" How could anyone not? There must be thousands of volumes. She moved toward the nearest shelf, drawn by the leather-bound spines. 7,426, he said. Or there were when I last catalogued them. She turned to him in surprise. You catalogued them yourself? Yes. There was a hint of defensiveness in his tone. I find it relaxing. I meant no criticism. I'm impressed. Most men of your station would consider such a task beneath them. His smile returned, smaller but somehow more intimate. Most men of my station don't read half their libraries, either. I've read nearly all of mine. Olivia's eyes widened. All 7,000. I did specify nearly. And I've had plenty of time for reading. During the war, she asked, suddenly curious about his military service. The smile vanished, his expression shuttering closed. Among other times. Mrs. Winters, sensing the sudden tension, cleared her throat. Shall we continue to the upper floors, Your Grace? Yes, he said abruptly. Miss Lydia will want to see the young ladies' wing. As they followed the housekeeper, Olivia noted how Preston's shoulders had tensed, how the scar on his face seemed more pronounced in his rigid profile. Clearly, the war was a painful subject, not surprising, given the devastating injuries many soldiers had sustained. Was that the source of his emotional distance? Some wound, physical or spiritual, that had left him wary of connection? The tour concluded in the Duchess's chambers, a suite of rooms decorated in pale blue and silver that took Olivia's breath away. The bedchamber featured a massive four-poster bed, a marble fireplace, and windows overlooking the private garden. "These rooms have not been used since the late Duchess passed some 15 years ago," Mrs. Winters explained. "His Grace has ordered them completely refurbished for you, Miss Linden." "They're beautiful," Olivia murmured, touched by the consideration. "Thank you." Preston nodded stiffly. "I shall have my valet show you the connecting door to the Duke's chambers." He strode off, leaving Olivia blushing at the pointed reminder of the marital duties that would soon be expected of her. Later, as their carriage returned them to their modest home, Lydia squeezed her hand excitedly. "It's like a palace. And did you see how he looked when you admired the library? I told you he has feelings." Appreciation for a shared interest is hardly the same as romantic feeling, Lydia. But it's a start. And the way he had the Duchess's rooms redone just for you. That simple courtesy, Olivia insisted, though she had been moved by the gesture. But as she prepared for bed that night, Olivia found herself wondering about the man she was to marry. He was clearly intelligent, educated, and capable of consideration. Yet there was a wall around him, a barrier she couldn't penetrate. What had happened to make him declare so firmly that his heart was not part of their bargain? And why did that declaration disturb her more with each passing day? The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cool, a perfect September day. Olivia stood before her mirror in a wedding gown of ivory silk, embroidered with seed pearls and silver thread. It was the most exquisite garment she had ever worn, yet she barely saw it, lost as she was in her own tumultuous thoughts. By this evening, she would be the Duchess of Jarlton. She would have a new name, a new home, a new life. She had achieved precisely the practical marriage she had always advocated, securing her future and Lydia's with a single "I do." So why did she feel this strange hollowness, this sense of something important left undone? "You look absolutely beautiful," Lydia said, entering the room in her bridesmaid's gown of pale green. "The Duke will be speechless." "I doubt it," Olivia smiled. "His Grace is never at a loss for words." "His Grace is also never late, and the carriage has arrived," Lydia said, peering out the window. "Are you ready?" Olivia took a deep breath. "Yes. I've been preparing for this kind of marriage my entire life, haven't I?" Lydia gave her a searching look. "Have you?" Before Olivia could answer, Mrs. Perkins appeared to announce that everything was ready. The moment for reflection had passed. It was time. The ceremony at St. George's was small but elegant. Only a handful of guests were present, a few of Preston's relatives and business associates, none of whom Olivia had met before. She felt strangely alone as she walked down the aisle, having no father to give her away and only Lydia as a familiar face among the attendees. Preston waited at the altar, resplendent in formal attire, his expression as unreadable as ever. When she reached his side, he offered his arm without a word, his eyes briefly scanning her appearance with what might have been approval. The service proceeded with solemn dignity. Olivia spoke her vows in a clear, steady voice, surprising herself with the depth of emotion she felt as she promised to honor and cherish this man she barely knew. Preston's responses were equally firm, though his hand, when he placed the wedding band on her finger, was not quite steady. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the vicar declared. "Your Grace, you may kiss your bride." There was a moment of palpable tension as Preston turned to her. It occurred to Olivia that this would be their first physical contact beyond the most formal hand-to-elbow guidance. His eyes met hers, questioning, almost wary. Then he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was brief and proper, yet sent an unexpected warmth through her body. When he drew back, something in his expression had shifted, a flash of surprise, quickly masked. Had he felt it too, that strange current between them? There was no time to ponder, as they were immediately surrounded by well-wishers. The small wedding breakfast that followed was elegant but subdued, and by early afternoon, Olivia found herself in a travelling carriage bound for Thornfield, Preston's estate in Derbyshire. Lydia would follow in a week, after the newly wedded couple had time to settle in, as Preston had diplomatically phrased it. The true meaning was clear enough to make Olivia's cheeks warm whenever she thought of the night ahead. The journey was long and largely silent. Preston seemed absorbed in his own thoughts, occasionally pointing out a landmark or asking if she was comfortable, but offering no real conversation. Olivia, for her part, found herself increasingly nervous as the miles passed, the reality of what awaited her at their destination becoming more pressing with each turn of the wheels. By the time they reached Thornfield, darkness had fallen. Olivia caught only shadowy impressions of a massive stone structure as the carriage pulled into a circular drive. Servants lined the entrance with lanterns, illuminating stone steps that led to a grand oak door. "Welcome to Thornfield," Preston said, handing her down from the carriage. "Your new home." The word should have pleased her. Instead, they heightened her sense of unreality. This enormous mansion, these bowing servants, this silent man beside her, it was all so far removed from the life she had known that she felt almost dizzy with the contrast. Preston must have sensed her disorientation, for he placed a steadying hand at the small of her back. "The staff can be properly introduced tomorrow. For now, I'm sure you'd like to rest after our journey." "Yes, thank you," she managed, grateful for the reprieve. A dignified older man who introduced himself as Simmons, the butler, led them into a grand entrance hall with a sweeping staircase. Paintings of stern-looking ancestors lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow Olivia as she climbed the stairs. "Your rooms have been prepared, Your Grace," Simmons said. "The Duchess's maid is waiting to assist Her Grace." Preston nodded. "Thank you, Simmons. We'll dine in an hour." The Duchess's chambers at Thornfield were even more magnificent than those in London, a suite of rooms decorated in shades of gold and cream, with windows that Olivia guessed would offer breathtaking views by daylight. A middle-aged woman with a kind face curtsied as they entered. "Your Grace, this is Thompson, who will serve as your lady's maid until you wish to make your own arrangements," Preston said. "Thank you," Olivia said to the maid. "I'm sure we'll get along splendidly." Preston lingered in the doorway, looking suddenly uncertain. "I'll leave you to refresh yourself. Dinner will be served in the small dining room." "I'll be ready," Olivia assured him. After he left, Thompson helped her change from her traveling clothes into an evening gown of deep blue silk, another of the many new garments that had been delivered in the weeks before the wedding. "The blue becomes you, Your Grace," Thompson said as she arranged Olivia's hair in a simple but elegant style. "His Grace will be pleased." "Will he?" Olivia wondered. Thus far, Preston had shown little reaction to her appearance beyond basic courtesy. Even their wedding kiss had been perfunctory, though not, she had to admit, entirely without effect on her own senses. Dinner was served in what Preston called the small dining room, though it could easily have accommodated 20 guests. They sat at opposite ends of a table that seemed to stretch for miles, making conversation all but impossible. The meal was exquisite, the service impeccable, but Olivia found herself picking at her food, her appetite diminished by the growing tension she felt. When the dessert course was removed, Preston finally broke the long silence. "Would you care to join me for a brandy in the library?" Surprised by the invitation, most gentlemen took their port alone while ladies withdrew. Olivia nodded. "I'd like that very much." The Thornfield Library was even more impressive than the one in London, a vast, two-story room with rolling ladders to reach the highest shelves and comfortable seating arranged near a massive fireplace. A fire had been lit against the autumn chill, casting a warm glow over the book-lined walls. Preston poured brandy into 2 crystal glasses, handing one to Olivia. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. "New beginnings," she echoed, taking a small sip. The liquor burned pleasantly down her throat. They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Preston gestured to a pair of chairs near the fire. "Please, sit. There's something I should explain." Olivia's heart quickened. Was this to be the discussion of marital expectations she had been both dreading and anticipating? Once they were seated, Preston stared into the fire for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was uncharacteristically hesitant. "I imagine you must have questions about the nature of our marriage." "Some," she admitted, keeping her tone neutral. He nodded, still not meeting her eyes. "I want to assure you that I do not expect, that is, there will be no pressure for you to fulfill certain aspects of our arrangement immediately." Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "You mean, I mean that separate bedchambers can be maintained for as long as you wish." Now he did look at her, his expression grave. "While an heir will eventually be necessary, I am not impatient in that regard." Relief and something strangely like disappointment mingled in Olivia's breast. "That's very considerate of you, Your Grace, Preston." "It's practical," he said, his usual brisk manner returning. "We are strangers to each other. It would be unreasonable to expect immediate intimacy." "Yes, of course." Olivia took another sip of brandy, gathering her courage. "May I ask you something?" "You may ask anything." "I may not answer." She smiled at his honesty. "Fair enough. I was wondering, why did you really propose to me? Was it truly just gratitude to my father?" Preston was silent for so long that Olivia thought he might invoke his right not to answer. Finally, he sighed. "Gratitude was part of it. But also, convenience. Convenience. I required a duchess for practical reasons. My solicitors had been pressing me on the matter of an heir. My Aunt Augusta had been parading eligible young ladies before me for 3 London seasons." His mouth twisted. "I found them all insufferable, empty-headed, money-hungry, or both. Whereas I was conveniently in need of financial rescue," Olivia said, trying to keep the hurt from her voice. "No," he said sharply. "That's not." He set down his brandy glass with a thunk. "I observed you, before I ever approached you." "You what?" "After I learned of your father's death and your circumstances, I made inquiries. I learned of your reputation for intelligence and practicality. I even attended services at your parish church, sitting at the back where you wouldn't notice me." Olivia stared at him, astonished. "You were investigating me." "Assessing your suitability," he corrected. "And you confirmed my impressions when we met. You are straightforward, intelligent, and practical. You understand that marriage need not be a romantic entanglement to be successful." "I see." Olivia wasn't sure whether to be flattered or disturbed by his methodical approach. "And the warning about your heart?" "That it wasn't part of our bargain." Something dark flickered in his eyes. That was simple honesty. "I have no heart to offer, Olivia. It was damaged beyond repair some years ago." The pain in his voice was unmistakable, and Olivia found herself leaning forward. "May I ask what happened?" "No." His tone brooked no argument. "That is a subject I do not discuss." "Ever." Chastened, she nodded. "I apologize for prying." Preston's expression softened slightly. "No apology needed. It's natural to be curious about one's spouse." He rose abruptly. "It's been a long day. You must be tired." Taking the hint, Olivia stood as well. Yes, the journey was rather taxing. I'll show you the way back to your chambers. They walked in silence through the dimly lit corridors of Thornfield, their footsteps echoing on the marble floors. When they reached the door to her suite, Preston stopped. "There is a connecting door between our chambers," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "It remains unlocked, but I will not enter without invitation." "Thank you," Olivia said, suddenly shy. Preston hesitated, then surprised her by taking her hand and bringing it to his lips in a formal gesture. "Good night, Duchess." The title, spoken in his deep voice, sent an unexpected shiver through her. "Good night, Duke." As the door closed behind her, Olivia released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her husband was an enigma, formal yet considerate, distant yet attentive to her comfort. And somewhere beneath his controlled exterior lay a pain so deep he couldn't speak of it. Despite herself, Olivia found that her practical heart was becoming increasingly curious about the wounded one Preston claimed not to possess. The next morning, Olivia woke to sunlight streaming through tall windows and the disorienting sensation of not knowing, for a moment, where she was. Then memory returned, the wedding, the journey, the strange conversation in the library. She was the Duchess of Jarlton now, mistress of this vast estate and wife to a man who remained largely a mystery to her. Thompson appeared with a breakfast tray and the information that His Grace had already departed for a meeting with his steward but would return for luncheon. Olivia was secretly relieved. The light of day brought a certain awkwardness to their new relationship, and she welcomed the opportunity to explore Thornfield alone first. After breakfast, she dressed in one of her new morning gowns and set out to acquaint herself with her new home. The estate was even more impressive by daylight, a grand Palladian mansion set amidst carefully landscaped gardens, with views of rolling hills beyond. Inside, the house was a maze of corridors and staircases connecting dozens of rooms. Some were clearly used regularly, the library, the morning room, Preston's study, while others had the musty, unused feel of spaces long neglected. There was a formal ballroom with mirrors that hadn't been polished in years, and a music room where the pianoforte was badly out of tune. "The late Duke was not one for entertaining," explained Mrs. Fleming, the housekeeper, when Olivia asked about these neglected spaces. "And the current Duke?" She hesitated. "Yes?" Olivia prompted. "His Grace prefers solitude. Since his return from the war, especially." This was the second reference to Preston's military service affecting him. Olivia's curiosity deepened. Was he badly injured in the fighting? Mrs. Fleming's expression grew guarded. "It's not my place to discuss His Grace's private matters." "Of course. Forgive me." But Olivia made a mental note to pursue this line of inquiry more carefully. There was clearly something significant in Preston's war experience that had shaped his current character. She continued her exploration, eventually finding herself in a long gallery lined with family portraits. Near the end hung a painting that arrested her attention, a younger Preston, perhaps 25, his face unlined and free of the scar that now marked his right cheek. He was smiling slightly, his grey eyes lighter, almost mischievous. Beside him stood a beautiful woman with golden hair and a dazzling smile. That would be His Grace with Lady Caroline Mercer, his betrothed, came a voice behind her. Olivia turned to find Simmons, the butler, who had approached silently. "His betrothed? I didn't realize Preston had been engaged before." Simmons looked immediately discomfited, as if realizing he had spoken out of turn. "It was many years ago, Your Grace. Before the war." "What happened to her?" Olivia asked, studying the radiant couple in the portrait. "I'm afraid I cannot say. His Grace does not permit discussion of that time." Again, that wall of silence. Olivia nodded, respecting the servant's loyalty while feeling increasingly frustrated by the mystery surrounding her husband's past. She was still contemplating the portrait when the sound of approaching footsteps made her turn. Preston stood at the entrance to the gallery, his expression inscrutable as he took in the scene before him. "I see you've been exploring," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Yes, Thornfield is magnificent." She gestured to the portrait. "I was just admiring the family collection." His eyes flicked to the painting, and something like pain crossed his features before his mask of indifference returned. "Some of these should perhaps be relocated. This gallery hasn't been updated in years." "She's very beautiful," Olivia said quietly, nodding toward the golden-haired woman. Preston's jaw tightened. "She was, yes. What happened to her?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "She died." His voice was flat, final. "Luncheon is served in the morning room when you're ready." He turned on his heel and strode away, leaving Olivia with the distinct impression that she had just glimpsed the wound that had supposedly destroyed his heart. Luncheon was a strained affair, with Preston responding to Olivia's attempts at conversation with monosyllables. Only when she mentioned her interest in seeing the estate's account books did he seem to engage. "You wish to review the accounts?" he asked, eyebrows raised. "If you have no objection. I've always had a head for figures, and as mistress of Thornfield, I should familiarize myself with its operations." A hint of approval flickered in his eyes. Most ladies would prefer to concern themselves with menus and visiting cards. "I'm not most ladies," Olivia said with a small smile. "As you noted when you proposed." "So I did." He studied her for a moment. "Very well. I'll have my steward prepare the household ledgers for your review. The estate books are kept in my study, you may examine them there if you wish." "Thank you." Olivia hesitated, then added, "I apologize if my questions in the gallery were intrusive. I'm still learning what subjects are sensitive." Preston's expression softened slightly. "It is I who should apologize for my abruptness. You couldn't have known." He set down his napkin. "Perhaps we should establish a rule: if either of us asks a question the other doesn't wish to answer, a simple "I prefer not to discuss that" will suffice. No offense taken, no explanations needed." "That seems eminently reasonable," Olivia agreed, relieved by this small progress toward understanding. Later that afternoon, as Olivia was reviewing the household accounts in her sitting room, a knock came at the door. She opened it to find Preston, looking somewhat awkward. "I thought you might like to see the rose garden," he said. "It's at its best this time of year." Surprised and pleased by the invitation, Olivia set aside the ledgers. "I'd love to." The September air was crisp but pleasant as they walked side by side along gravelled paths. Preston maintained a formal distance, his hands clasped behind his back, but his manner was less rigid than it had been at luncheon. "The gardens were my mother's passion," he explained as they approached a walled enclosure. "After she died, my father let them fall into neglect, but I had them restored when I inherited." "They're beautiful," Olivia said sincerely as they entered the rose garden. Late-blooming flowers in every hue filled the air with fragrance. "My mother loved roses too. We had a small garden behind our London house." "Tell me about her," Preston said, surprising her with the personal question. "She was kind, intelligent, and stronger than anyone knew," Olivia said, touched by his interest. "After my father's gambling debts mounted, she managed our household on next to nothing, never letting society see how desperate our situation had become." "Like mother, like daughter," Preston observed quietly. Olivia glanced at him sharply. "You knew about father's gambling?" Colonel Linden's financial weaknesses were well known among his fellow officers. I do not judge him for it, for many men seek solace in cards and dice after witnessing the horrors of war. But not you? Olivia asked. Preston's mouth twisted in a wry smile. I found other ways to cope. Such as books, solitude, work. He stopped beside a particularly beautiful white rose. And gardens. There is something restorative about creating beauty and order from chaos. It was the most personal thing he had shared with her, and Olivia felt oddly moved by this glimpse of his inner life. Is that what you seek, then? Order? Among other things. His gaze, when it met hers, was intense. What do you seek, Olivia? The directness of the question caught her off guard. She hesitated, searching for honesty. Security, I supposed. For myself and Lydia. But also, purpose. Usefulness. Not love. The word seemed to surprise him as much as it did her. I never expected love in marriage, she said carefully. As you noted when you proposed, we are well matched in our practical view of the institution. He nodded, though something like disappointment flickered across his face. Yes, indeed. They continued their walk in thoughtful silence, the unspoken question lingering between them. If not love, then what exactly were they seeking in this marriage of convenience? The days settled into a pattern. Mornings Olivia spent reviewing accounts and meeting with various staff members, learning the complexities of managing a great estate. Afternoons often included a tour of some part of the property with Preston, who proved to be knowledgeable about everything from crop rotation to the architectural history of Thornfield. Evenings were the most pleasant, as they dined together and then retired to the library, where they would read in companionable silence or occasionally discuss books they had both enjoyed. These quiet hours revealed a side of Preston that intrigued Olivia more and more, his intelligence, his dry wit, his unexpected passion for poetry. Yet for all these glimpses of the man beneath the formal exterior, Preston maintained an emotional distance. He never spoke of his life before or during the war, never mentioned Lady Caroline, and never approached the connecting door between their chambers, though Olivia sometimes found herself glancing at it before she went to sleep, wondering what might happen if one of them were to knock. Lydia arrived as promised, bringing with her a fresh perspective and irrepressible energy that lightened the sometimes solemn atmosphere of Thornfield. To Olivia's surprise, Preston seemed to genuinely enjoy her sister's company, tolerating her romantic flights of fancy with more patience than Olivia herself often showed. He likes you, Lydia declared one afternoon as the sisters walked in the gardens. He watches you when you're not looking. Don't start that again, Olivia sighed. Preston and I have an arrangement that suits us both. There's no need to embellish it with romantic notions. But don't you want more? Lydia persisted. You've been married nearly 2 weeks, and from what I can tell, you spend your evenings discussing crop yields and Byron's poetry. Hardly the stuff of passion. Olivia felt her cheeks warm. Marriages of our class are not generally based on passion, Lydia. Nonsense. Look at the Westmorlands, or the Jerseys. They married for love despite their rank. And we married for practicality despite ours, Olivia countered. It's working perfectly well. But was it? As the days passed, Olivia found herself increasingly aware of Preston in ways that had nothing to do with practicality. She noticed the breadth of his shoulders when he reached for a book on a high shelf, the rare smile that transformed his austere features when something amused him, the intensity of his gaze when he was explaining something he cared about. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, she caught him looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, something between curiosity and hunger, quickly masked when he realized she had noticed. These moments left her feeling unsettled, aware of a tension building between them that had no outlet in their carefully structured relationship. The situation came to a head one evening about 3 weeks after the wedding. They were in the library as usual, Olivia reading a novel while Preston reviewed correspondence at his desk. An autumn storm raged outside, rain lashing against the windows and thunder occasionally rumbling in the distance. "Oh!" Olivia exclaimed as a particularly loud thunderclap shook the house, causing her to drop her book. Preston looked up, concerned. "Are you afraid of storms?" "Not usually," she admitted, but that was rather startling. He rose and crossed to the fireplace, adding another log to the blaze. "The storms can be fierce here in the hills. This house has withstood them for 2 centuries, though." A reassuring thought, Olivia smiled, picking up her fallen book. As she did, the pages fell open to reveal a folded letter that had been tucked inside. Preston's eyes widened as he saw it. "Where did you get that book?" "From the shelf there," Olivia said, confused by his sudden tension. "Is something wrong?" He strode across the room and took the volume from her hands, his movements uncharacteristically abrupt. "This shouldn't have been," he broke off as he saw the letter, his face paling. "Preston? What is it?" He didn't answer, staring at the letter with an expression of such raw pain that Olivia's heart clenched in sympathy. "I'm sorry if I've disturbed something private," she said softly. "I didn't read anything." He seemed to come back to himself then, his features arranging themselves into their usual mask of control. "It's nothing. An old letter I'd forgotten was there." But his hand trembled slightly as he refolded the paper, betraying the lie. Impulsively, Olivia reached out and touched his arm. "Preston, we've been married nearly a month, yet I know almost nothing about you. Whatever pain you're carrying, perhaps sharing it would help." For a moment, she thought he might actually confide in her. His eyes met hers, filled with a storm of emotions. Then he shook his head, stepping back from her touch. "Some wounds are best left undisturbed," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "Good night, Olivia." He left the library, taking the book and its hidden letter with him, leaving Olivia feeling strangely bereft, as if she'd been offered a glimpse of something precious only to have it snatched away. She remained by the fire for a long time, listening to the storm and wondering about the man whose name she bore but whose heart remained as distant as if they were strangers. Later that night, unable to sleep, Olivia found herself drawn to the connecting door between their chambers. She had never attempted to open it, respecting Preston's declaration that he would not enter without invitation. But now, driven by concern and a growing sense that their carefully constructed arrangement was becoming unsustainable, she placed her hand on the latch. Before she could turn it, a sound from the other side made her pause, a low, anguished cry that raised the hair on her arms. Was Preston injured? Ill? Without further hesitation, she opened the door and stepped into the darkened room beyond. Lightning briefly illuminated the chamber, revealing Preston thrashing in his bed, clearly in the grip of a nightmare. "No," he moaned. "Caroline, don't!" The fire. Olivia hurried to his side, uncertain whether to wake him. "Preston," she called softly, then more firmly when he didn't respond. "Preston, wake up! You're dreaming." His eyes flew open, unfocused and wild with terror. For a moment, he didn't seem to recognize her. "It's Olivia," she said, keeping her voice calm despite the rapid beating of her heart. "You were having a nightmare." "Olivia!" He blinked, awareness returning. "What are you?" He pushed himself upright, raking a hand through his disheveled hair. "I apologize if I disturbed you." "You didn't." "I couldn't sleep and heard." She hesitated, then pressed on. "You called out a name." "Caroline." Preston's expression closed like a door slamming shut. "Did I? I don't recall." "Preston." Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, bold in a way she would never have been in daylight. Who was she? What happened to her? For a long moment, she thought he would retreat again behind his wall of silence. Then, perhaps weakened by the nightmare or simply weary of carrying his burden alone, he sighed deeply. She was my betrothed. Before the war. The woman in the portrait, Olivia nodded. Yes. We were to be married when I returned from the peninsula. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, but his hands gripped the bedcovers tightly. I was wounded at Salamanca, the battle where your father saved my life. The injury became infected, and for a time, it was uncertain whether I would survive, let alone return to England. But you did recover, Olivia prompted gently when he fell silent. Physically, yes. It took months, but eventually I was deemed fit enough to travel home. A muscle worked in his jaw. I didn't write to Caroline about the severity of my injuries. I didn't want her to worry, and I expected to be home soon enough to explain in person. Olivia had a sudden, terrible intuition about where this story was leading. What happened when you returned? Lightning flashed again, illuminating Preston's face, haunted, vulnerable in a way she had never seen it. I arrived in England to discover she had married another man in my absence, my cousin, Robert. They were living here, at Thornfield, which was still my father's property at the time. Oh, Preston, Olivia breathed. How terrible for you. That wasn't the worst of it. His voice had dropped almost to a whisper. I confronted them, of course. There was a terrible argument. Robert claimed she had believed me dead, though my letters clearly proved otherwise. Caroline. He swallowed hard. Caroline admitted she couldn't face the prospect of being tied to an invalid. My injury had left me with a limp at that time, and the scar was still red and angry. Olivia felt a surge of anger on his behalf. She abandoned you because of a scar. She said she deserved a whole man, not damaged goods. The bitterness in his voice was raw, even after so many years. I left immediately, went to London in a fury. That night, Thornfield's East Wing caught fire. Robert escaped, but Caroline. She died in the fire, Olivia finished for him, understanding at last the significance of his nightmare. Preston nodded, his face ashen. Robert claimed I had set the fire in revenge. There was no proof, but the suspicion followed me. My father believed him over me. I was all but banished until my father's death 5 years ago. But you didn't do it, Olivia said with absolute certainty. I know you didn't. He looked at her with surprise. How can you be so sure? You barely know me. I know enough. She reached out and took his hand. You are many things, Preston Jarlton, reserved, sometimes frustratingly private, occasionally stubborn, but you are not a man who would commit murder, even in the heat of passion. Something shifted in his eyes, surprise, followed by a warmth she had never seen before. You have a remarkable faith in my character. I have observed you, she said, echoing his own words from their conversation in the London library. You are honorable, kind to those who depend on you, and far more gentle than you pretend to be. He stared at their joined hands. Caroline's betrayal taught me that love is too dangerous, too painful to risk. I decided then that I would never allow myself to be vulnerable again. When I proposed to you, I truly believed a practical, emotionless marriage was all I could offer. And now? Olivia asked, her heart beating rapidly. Preston raised his eyes to hers. Now I find that my supposedly dead heart has been behaving in a most alarming manner whenever you're near. The admission hung in the air between them, charged with possibilities. Olivia felt a smile begin to curve her lips. How very inconvenient for you, she said lightly, though her voice trembled slightly. especially since I've recently discovered that my own practical nature has been thoroughly compromised by certain feelings I had not anticipated. Feelings. He was leaning closer now, his eyes intent on her face. Decidedly impractical ones, she admitted. Involving a considerable amount of affection, admiration, and... She took a deep breath. Desire. The word seemed to break something open between them. Preston's hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle but sure. "Olivia," he said, her name a question and an answer all at once. And then he was kissing her, not the brief, formal touch of lips they had shared at their wedding, but a real kiss, deep and searching and full of all the emotions they had both been denying. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Preston rested his forehead against hers. "I should warn you," he murmured, "that I may be developing a thoroughly impractical attachment to my wife." "How shocking," Olivia replied, her fingers threading through his hair. "And I who thought I had married the most rational of men." "Rational men don't fall in love with practical women who turn out to have the most passionate hearts imaginable," he said, and kissed her again, drawing her down beside him on the bed. Later, as they lay tangled together in the aftermath of passion, Preston traced the curve of Olivia's cheek with gentle fingers. "I told myself I was offering you a business arrangement," he said quietly. "But I think even then, some part of me was hoping for more. Why else would I have chosen a woman whose intelligence and strength I already admired? And I told myself I wanted a practical marriage," Olivia admitted. "But perhaps what I really wanted was a man who would see me, truly see me, and value me for exactly who I am." "I do see you, Olivia Jarlton," Preston said, his voice rich with emotion. "And what I see is the most remarkable woman I've ever known. Even more remarkable than you expected when you were investigating me," she teased. "Far more." His smile faded into seriousness. "I told you once that my heart was not part of our bargain because I believed it was damaged beyond repair. I was wrong. It was simply waiting for the right person to heal it." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes at the simple honesty of his words. "And I thought I was making a purely practical choice, when in fact I was finding the great love I never dared to hope for." Preston gathered her closer, his kiss a promise. "It seems, my practical Duchess, that we have both been surprised by love." "The most welcome surprise imaginable," Olivia agreed, resting her head on his chest, where his supposedly non-existent heart beat strong and true beneath her ear. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind a night sky washed clean and bright with stars, much like the two hearts that had found, in their practical arrangement, the love they had both been secretly seeking all along.